The moment Amara Johnson's eyes met those of the awakening coma patient, her world shattered. The man whose life she'd spent years preserving uttered words that would forever change them both. "You saved me from more than just death." Amara's heart raced as she stared into the steel blue eyes of Robert Caldwell, a man she had come to know intimately over the past 3 years, yet had never truly met. The steady beep of the heart monitor quickened, matching her own pulse as she processed the weight of his words. The antiseptic smell of the hospital room seemed to intensify, making her slightly dizzy as she gripped the metal railing of the bed for support. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you know where you are?" Robert's gaze never left hers as he replied, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Oakville Memorial. And you're Amara, the angel who's been by my side all this time." Amara felt a lump form in her throat. How could he possibly know her name? She had always been careful to maintain professional boundaries, even when speaking to him during his coma. And angel? The irony of that word coming from a man known for his white supremacist views was not lost on her. "You've been in a coma for 3 years, Mr. Caldwell," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's normal to feel confused." "I'm not confused, Amara," he interrupted, his hand reaching out to touch hers. She instinctively flinched but didn't pull away. "I heard you. Every day. Your voice. It changed everything." The door to the room burst open, startling them both. Dr. Marcus Rivera rushed in, his white coat flapping behind him. "Amara, I got the alert. Is he?" He stopped short, seeing Robert awake and alert. "Mr. Caldwell, welcome back. I'm Dr. Rivera, your attending physician." As Dr. Rivera began his examination, Amara stepped back, her mind reeling. She watched as Robert answered questions coherently, his eyes occasionally darting back to her. She felt exposed, vulnerable. What exactly had he heard during those long years? And more importantly, how had it changed it? The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. News of Robert's awakening spread quickly through the hospital. Nurses and doctors filed in and out, running tests and asking questions. Through it all, Amara stood in the corner of the room, unable to leave yet unsure of her place in this new reality. As the day wore on, the stream of medical personnel slowed, and Amara found herself alone with Robert once again. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, giving everything a surreal golden glow. "Amara," Robert said, his voice stronger now. "We need to talk." She approached the bed cautiously, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mr. Caldwell, you've been through a lot. You should rest." He shook his head, a determined look in his eyes. "No, this can't wait. I need you to understand. I'm not the same man I was before." Amara's breath caught in her throat. She had dreamed of this moment, imagined countless scenarios where she confronted the man whose ideology had caused so much pain. But now, faced with the reality, she found herself at a loss for words. "I heard everything," Robert continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Your stories, your struggles, your kindness. Even when you knew who I was, what I believed. It broke me, Amara, and it put me back together. Single quotes." Tears welled up in Amara's eyes, but she blinked them back. She couldn't allow herself to hope. Not yet. "Mr. Caldwell, you've been through a traumatic experience. It's natural to feel grateful." He finished for her. "Ashamed? Transformed?" "Because I feel all of those things and more." He reached out again, and this time Amara didn't flinch as he took her hand. "I was lost in darkness, Amara. Your voice, your care. It was a light I couldn't ignore. You showed me a humanity I had denied for so long." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air between them. Amara's mind raced, trying to reconcile the man before her with the image she had carried for so long. Could people truly change so fundamentally? And if so, what did that mean for her community, for the world they shared? As if reading her thoughts, Robert spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know words aren't enough. I have a lifetime of actions to atone for. But I promise you, Amara, I'm not the same man who entered this hospital. And I owe that all to you." Amara felt a tear slip down her cheek, unable to hold it back any longer. The enormity of the moment washed over her. The years of struggle, the daily battle between duty and anger, the small moments of connection that had slowly chipped away at her own prejudices. She realized that in trying to save Robert, she had also saved a part of herself. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, then paused, taking a deep breath. "Robert, I don't know what to say." He squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just, will you help me? Help me become the person you saw worth saving?" In that moment, looking into Robert's eyes, Amara saw something she never expected to find: hope. Hope for change, for redemption, for a world where the cycles of hate could be broken. It was a fragile thing, this newborn hope, but it was real. "Yes," she whispered, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "Yes, I'll help you." As the last rays of sunlight faded from the room, Amara and Robert sat in silence, their hands still joined. They both knew that the journey ahead would be long and difficult, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But in that quiet moment, a seed of understanding had been planted, a small but powerful testament to the transformative power of compassion and the indomitable nature of the human spirit. Outside the hospital room, life continued its chaotic dance. Nurses rushed through corridors, monitors beeped, and families waited anxiously for news of their loved ones. But inside, a profound change had taken place, one that would ripple out into the world in ways neither Amara nor Robert could yet imagine. Dr. Rivera watched through the window, a mixture of awe and apprehension on his face. He had seen many medical miracles in his career, but this was something entirely different. He knew that the real work was just beginning, not just for Robert and Amara, but for the entire hospital and the community beyond its walls. As night fell over Oakville Memorial Hospital, a new chapter was beginning, one that would challenge preconceptions, test the limits of forgiveness, and explore the very essence of what it means to be human. The journey of healing, both physical and spiritual, had only just begun. As the first rays of dawn crept through the hospital room's blinds, Amara found herself still seated by Robert's bedside. She had dozed off in the uncomfortable plastic chair, her hand still loosely holding his. The events of the previous evening felt surreal, like a vivid dream she couldn't quite shake. A soft knock on the door startled her awake. Nurse Stephanie Chun, Amara's closest friend at the hospital, poked her head in. Her eyes widened at the sight of Amara and Robert. "Amara," Stephanie whispered, motioning for her to come outside. A word? Gently extracting her hand from Robert's, Amara followed Stephanie into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on Stephanie's concerned face. "What are you doing?" Stephanie hissed, her voice low but intense. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" Amara rubbed her eyes, the weight of the past 24 hours settling on her shoulders. "Steph, it's not what you think. He's different." Stephanie's eyebrows shot up. "Different?" "Amara, he's the same man who led rallies calling for people like us to be sent back where we came from. One coma doesn't change that." The words stung, bringing Amara crashing back to reality. She had spent years caring for Robert, but Stephanie's reminder of his past actions sent a chill down her spine. How could she reconcile the hateful man she knew of with the vulnerable, changed person she had spoken to last night? "You don't understand," Amara began, but Stephanie cut her off. "No, you don't understand. The whole hospital is talking. Some of the staff are furious that we even treated him. Others are worried about what'll happen when his friends find out he's awake. This isn't just about you anymore, Amara." The gravity of the situation began to sink in. In the emotional whirlwind of Robert's awakening, Amara had forgotten about the world outside their hospital room, a world that wouldn't be as quick to accept the idea of a reformed white supremacist. "What am I supposed to do, Steph?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ignore everything that happened. Pretend I didn't see a man genuinely changed?" Stephanie's expression softened slightly. She placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying be careful. For your sake and for the hospitals, this situation is a powder keg, and you're holding the match." As if on cue, the elevator at the end of the hall dinged, and out stepped Dr. Marcus Rivera. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, telling of a long night of meetings and phone calls. He spotted Amara and Stephanie and strode towards them, his face a mask of professional concern. "Amara, Stephanie, good morning," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to talk, now." The three of them ducked into an empty consultation room. Dr. Rivera closed the door and turned to face them, his expression grave. "I've been up all night dealing with the fallout from Ara Caldwell's awakening," he began. "The hospital board is in panic mode. They're worried about everything from negative press to potential violence." Amara felt her heart sink. "But Dr. Rivera, if they could just see him, talk to him, it's not that simple," he interrupted, holding up a hand. "Amara, I know you believe he's changed, and maybe he has, but we have to think about the bigger picture here." He began to pace the small room, his words coming faster now. "We've already had calls from local news outlets. It's only a matter of time before this goes national. And then there's the matter of Amara Caldwell's associates. We have to assume they'll be showing up soon, and not all of them will be happy to hear about his change of heart." Stephanie spoke up, her voice tight with worry. "What about security? Shouldn't we be increasing it?" Dr. Rivera nodded. "It's already done. But that's just a band-aid. We need a strategy, a way to handle this that protects the hospital, our staff, and yes, even Mr. Caldwell." Amara listened, feeling increasingly overwhelmed. The bubble of hope that had formed last night was rapidly deflating, replaced by a cold, hard knot of anxiety in her stomach. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice small but determined. Dr. Rivera's eyes softened as he looked at her. "For now, I need you to keep doing your job. Care for Mr. Caldwell as you would any other patient, but be prepared for scrutiny. Every interaction, every word exchanged, it could all become public very quickly." Amara nodded, her mind racing. She thought of the intimate conversation she'd had with Robert, the vulnerability they'd shared. The idea of that moment being dissected by the media or twisted by those who couldn't understand made her feel sick. "There's one more thing, Doctor," Rivera added, his tone cautious. "The board, they're considering transferring Mr. Caldwell to another facility, somewhere better equipped to handle the potential fallout." The words hit Amara like a physical blow. "You can't," she blurted out. "He needs consistency, familiar faces. If you move him now, it could undo all the progress." "I know, Doctor," Rivera interjected. "I'm fighting it. But I need you both to understand the gravity of this situation. One wrong move, and careers could be ended. Lives could be put at risk." A heavy silence fell over the room. Amara felt torn between her duty as a nurse, her budding connection with Robert, and her loyalty to the hospital and her colleagues. The simple act of caring for a patient had somehow become a political and ethical minefield. Stephanie broke the silence, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Amara, whatever you decide to do, I've got your back. Just be careful, okay?" Amara nodded, grateful for her friend's support. She turned to Dr. Rivera. "I want to continue caring for Robert. I believe in his change, and I believe in the power of compassion to heal more than just physical wounds. If that puts my job at risk, so be it." Dr. Rivera studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this by the book. Everything documented, everything above board. And at the first sign of trouble, we reevaluate." "Agreed?" "Agreed," Amara said, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. As they left the consultation room, Amara's mind was already racing ahead. She knew the real challenge was just beginning. How could she protect Robert's fragile new worldview while navigating the storm of public opinion and potential backlash? And perhaps more importantly, how could she guard her own heart against the possibility that this miraculous change might not be as complete or permanent as she hoped? The hospital corridors seemed different now, charged with an energy she couldn't quite name. As she made her way back to Robert's room, Amara steeled herself for the day ahead. Whatever came next, she was determined to face it with the same compassion and strength that had guided her through the past 3 years. Little did she know, forces were already in motion that would test that determination to its very limits. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across Oakville, the news of Robert Caldwell's awakening was spreading like wildfire. And with it, The stage was being set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of everything Amara thought she knew about forgiveness, redemption, and the capacity for human change. As Amara re-entered Robert's room, she found him awake, staring out the window with a pensive expression. The morning light cast a soft glow on his face, highlighting the lines etched by years of anger and hatred. Yet there was something different in his eyes now, a vulnerability, a questioning that hadn't been there before. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," Amara said, trying to keep her voice steady and professional. "How are you feeling today?" Robert turned to look at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Better than I have in years, Amara. And please, call me Robert." Amara nodded, moving to check his vitals. As she worked, she could feel Robert's eyes following her every move. The silence between them was charged with unspoken questions and uncertainties. Finally, Robert spoke. "I've been thinking about what I said last night, about changing, about wanting to be different. Single quotes." He paused, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. "I meant every word, Amara, but I'm scared. I don't know if I'm strong enough to face what's coming." Amara's hand stilled on the blood pressure cuff. She looked into Robert's eyes, seeing the fear and doubt swirling there. "What do you mean, Robert? What's coming?" He sighed heavily. "My past, the people I associated with, the things I've done. It's all gonna come crashing down on us, isn't it?" Before Amara could respond, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Raised voices and the sound of hurried footsteps grew louder. Suddenly, the door burst open and a group of people rushed in. At the forefront was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and a face twisted in anger. Behind him, two other men and a woman, all wearing clothing adorned with white supremacist symbols. Amara's heart raced as she recognized them from news reports, members of Robert's former organization. "Robert, what the hell is going on?" the lead man bellowed, his eyes darting between Robert and Amara. "We heard you were awake, but they wouldn't let us in. Had to force our way past those rent-a-cops downstairs." Robert's face had gone pale, his hand reaching out instinctively towards Amara. She stepped closer to the bed, placing herself between Robert and the intruders. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Amara said, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her veins. "This is a hospital and Mr. Caldwell needs rest." The man's eyes narrowed as he focused on Amara. "And who the hell are you? Some affirmative action higher-playing nurse?" He spat the words out, each one dripping with venom. Amara felt a familiar pain in her chest, the sting of racism she had endured countless times before. But before she could respond, Robert's voice rang out, clear and strong. "That's enough, Jake. You will not speak to her that way." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Robert. Jake's face contorted in confusion. "What? Robert, what are you talking about?" "Listen, don't you dare finish that word," Robert interrupted, his voice shaking with emotion. "Amara is the reason I'm alive. She's shown me more humanity in my darkest moments than I've seen in all our years of hate." Jake took a step back, shock written across his face. "Robert, you're confused. The coma, the drugs they've got you on." "I'm not confused," Robert said, his voice growing stronger. "For the first time in my life, I'm seeing clearly. And what I see is that everything we stood for, everything we preached, it was all wrong, Jake. So terribly wrong." The tension in the room was palpable. Amara could see the other intruders shifting uncomfortably, uncertain how to react to this unexpected turn of events. Jake, however, was not backing down. "You can't mean that," he growled, taking a menacing step towards the bed. "After everything we've built, everything we fought for, you're going to throw it all away because of some what, Jake?" Robert challenged. "Some human being who showed kindness when she had every reason not to? Someone who saw past the surface and cared for me as a person, not a symbol?" Amara stood rooted to the spot, her mind reeling from the confrontation unfolding before her. She had hoped for Robert's change of heart, but to see him defending her, standing up to his former allies, it was more than she had dared to imagine. Suddenly, the door burst open again. Dr. Rivera rushed in, flanked by two burly security guards. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his eyes taking in the scene. Jake turned to face the newcomers, his face a mask of fury. "This isn't over, Robert," he snarled. "You can't just walk away from us. We won't let you." As the security guards moved to escort Jake and his group out, he pointed at Amara. "And you, watch your back. You have no idea what you've started." The threat hung in the air as they were led away, their angry shouts echoing down the corridor. Dr. Rivera quickly checked on Robert and Amara, ensuring they were unharmed before hurrying off to deal with the aftermath. In the sudden quiet of the room, Amara found herself trembling. The adrenaline that had kept her steady was wearing off, leaving her feeling drained and vulnerable. "Amara," Robert's voice was soft, filled with concern. "Are you all right? I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to be caught in the middle of this." She turned to look at him, seeing the guilt and worry etched on his face. In that moment, the last vestiges of doubt about his transformation faded away. This was not the act of a man clinging to his old beliefs. This was someone truly changed, willing to stand up to his past at great personal cost. "I'm okay, Robert," she said, moving closer to the bed. "But are you?" That couldn't have been easy. Robert shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It wasn't, but it was necessary. Amara, I meant what I said. You've shown me a better way, a path out of the darkness I've been living in. I can't go back." "I won't." Amara reached out, taking Robert's hand in hers. The simple act of human connection, once unthinkable between them, now felt like the most natural thing in the world. "You're not alone in this, Robert," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As they sat there, hand in hand, both Amara and Robert knew that this was only the beginning. The confrontation with Jake and his group was just a taste of the challenges that lay ahead. They would face opposition from all sides, those who couldn't believe in Robert's change, those who thought Amara was betraying her own people by helping him, and those who saw their growing bond as a threat to the status quo. But in that quiet hospital room, with the morning sun streaming through the windows, a seed of hope had taken root. It was fragile, yes, and would need careful nurturing to grow, but it was real, and it held the promise of something extraordinary, a testament to the power of compassion to overcome even the deepest divides. As the day wore on, news of the confrontation spread through the hospital like wildfire. Amara knew that soon she would have to face the questions, the doubts, and the fears of her colleagues and community. But for now, she allowed herself this moment of peace, drawing strength from the knowledge that sometimes, against all odds, people really could change. Outside the hospital, the world continued to turn, unaware of the profound transformation taking place within its walls. But soon, very soon, the story of Amara and Robert would burst into the public consciousness, challenging long-held beliefs and forcing people to confront their own capacity for change and forgiveness. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles. But as Amara looked into Robert's eyes, she saw something that gave her hope, a reflection of her own determination to prove that love could indeed conquer hate. As the day progressed, the hospital buzzed with activity. News of the morning's confrontation spread rapidly, and Amara found herself the subject of curious glances and whispered conversations wherever she went. The weight of scrutiny pressed down on her, making each step feel like a deliberate act of defiance. During her lunch break, Amara retreated to the hospital's small courtyard, seeking a moment of solitude. The late autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. She sat on a bench, cradling a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, lost in thought. "Mind if I join you?" Amara looked up to see Stephanie standing there, concern etched on her face. She nodded, and Stephanie sat down beside her. "I heard about what happened this morning," Stephanie said softly. "Are you okay?" Amara sighed, her breath visible in the cool air. "I don't know, Steph. Everything's happening so fast. This morning, when those men burst in, I was terrified. But then, Robert stood up for me. He confronted them, rejected everything they stand for." Stephanie listened intently, her brow furrowed. "That's unexpected. But Amara, you have to be careful. This situation is volatile. People are talking, and not everyone is as understanding as you. As if to underscore her point, a group of nurses walked by, their conversation dropping to hushed whispers as they passed. Amara felt their eyes on her, a mixture of curiosity and judgment. "I know," Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Steph, if you could see him, really see him, he's changed. I can't turn my back on that." Stephanie placed a hand on Amara's arm. "I trust your judgment. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? This isn't just about Robert anymore. It's about you too." Amara nodded, grateful for her friend's support. As they sat in companionable silence, Amara's phone buzzed. It was a text from Dr. Rivera. "My office. ASAP." Anxiety knotted in Amara's stomach as she made her way to Dr. Rivera's office. She found him pacing behind his desk, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. "Amara, sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair. "We need to talk about Mr. Caldwell's situation." As Amara took a seat, Dr. Rivera leaned against his desk, his face grave. "The hospital board is in an uproar. This morning's incident has them spooked. They're talking about transferring Mar Caldwell to a high-security facility." Amara felt her heart sink. "But Dr. Rivera, you can't. He's making progress. Moving him now could undo everything." Dr. Rivera held up a hand. "I know, Amara. I've been fighting this decision, but we have to consider the safety of our staff and other patients. Not to mention the media circus that's brewing outside." For the first time, Amara noticed the drawn blinds in Dr. Rivera's office. She could almost feel the presence of reporters and cameras beyond the hospital walls, hungry for a story. "What if," Amara began, an idea forming, "what if we could show them that Robert has changed? If he could make a public statement, explain his transformation." Dr. Rivera shook his head. "It's too risky. We can't expose him to the media in his current condition. And frankly, Amara, we can't be certain his change of heart is permanent. Trauma, medication, your influence? There are many factors at play here." Amara felt a flare of frustration. "So we just give up on him? Push him away and let him become someone else's problem?" "That's not what I'm saying," Dr. Rivera replied, his voice softening. "But we need to be realistic about the challenges we're facing. This isn't just about Mr. Caldwell's recovery anymore. It's become a political and social powder keg." As they continued to discuss options, a knock on the door interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in, her face pale. "Dr. Rivera, you need to see this." They followed her to the nurse's station, where a small TV was tuned to a local news channel. Amara's breath caught in her throat as she saw Robert's face on the screen. The ticker at the bottom read, "Exclusive. White supremacist leader awakens from coma. Claims radical change of heart." The reporter's voice filled the air. Sources inside Oakville Memorial Hospital claimed that Robert Caldwell, known for his leadership of the white nationalist group Pure America, has renounced his racist beliefs after awakening from a 3-year coma. Witnesses report a confrontation between Caldwell and his former associates, during which he defended a black nurse who had been caring for him. The screen cut to an interview with a hospital orderly, his face blurred. "I heard him yelling at his old buddies, telling them they were wrong. Said this nurse had shown him what real humanity looks like." Amara felt the blood drain from her face as the implications sank in. Their private struggle had just been thrust onto the national stage. Dr. Rivera turned to her, his expression a mix of concern and resignation. "Amara, go to Mr. Caldwell. Make sure he's aware of what's happening. I need to call an emergency meeting with the board." As Amara hurried to Robert's room, she could feel the atmosphere in the hospital shifting. Curious eyes followed her, some supportive, others suspicious. She quickened her pace, her mind racing with the potential fallout of this news leak. She burst into Robert's room to find him sitting up in bed, his eyes glued to the TV mounted on the wall. As she entered, he turned to look at her, his face a mask of shock and fear. "Amara," he said, his voice trembling. "What's happening? How did they find out?" She moved to his bedside, taking his hand instinctively. "I don't know, Robert, but we'll figure this out together, okay?" As they sat there, watching the story unfold on the news, Amara felt a strange mix of fear and determination. This was not how she had envisioned their journey unfolding, but perhaps it was necessary. The world outside was about to weigh in on Robert's transformation, and she knew the court of public opinion could be merciless. "Robert," she said softly, turning to face him, "I need to know, are you ready for this? Because once we step into the spotlight, there's no going back. Every word, every action, it'll all be scrutinized." Robert met her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw a resolve that matched her own. "I'm terrified, Amara, but I'm also certain. What I told those men this morning, I meant every word. If I have to shout it from the rooftops to make people believe, then that's what I'll do." As they sat there, hand in hand, facing an uncertain future, Amara realized that their private journey of healing had become something much larger. They were now at the center of a national conversation about redemption, forgiveness, and the possibility of profound personal change. Outside the hospital, crowds were gathering. Reporters jockeyed for position, their cameras trained on the building's entrance. Protesters began to arrive, their signs expressing a range of emotions from hope to outrage. And in living rooms across the country, people tuned in to watch the unfolding drama, their own beliefs and prejudices about to be challenged in ways they never expected. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just Amara and Robert, but the very fabric of a society grappling with its deepest divisions. As the sun began to set on this tumultuous day, both Amara and Robert knew that their real journey was only just beginning. As night fell over Oakville Memorial Hospital, the atmosphere inside grew increasingly tense. The corridors, usually quiet at this hour, buzzed with activity as hospital staff struggled to maintain normalcy amidst a growing media frenzy outside. In Robert's room, Amara sat beside his bed, both of them watching the continuous news coverage with a mixture of fascination and dread. The story of the reformed white supremacist and the black nurse who cared for him had captured the nation's attention, sparking heated debates on every major network. "I never wanted this," Robert said softly, his eyes fixed on the TV screen, "to drag you into the spotlight like this, to make you a target." Amara turned to him, her face etched with determination. "We're in this together, Robert. I chose to stand by you, and I'm not backing down now." A gentle knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Rivera entered, looking exhausted but resolute. "Amara, Robert, we need to talk about our next steps. The hospital board has been in emergency sessions all evening, and we've come to a decision." Amara felt her heart race, fearing the worst. Would they force Robert's transfer despite everything? De Rivera took a deep breath before continuing. "We've decided to allow Mr. Caldwell to remain here under certain conditions. First, we'll be increasing security measures throughout the hospital. Second, we want to control the narrative as much as possible." "What does that mean exactly?" Amara asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "It means," Dr. Rivera explained, "that we want to arrange a controlled interview. One reporter, pre-approved questions in a setting we can manage. We believe it's the best way to address the public's curiosity, while protecting both of you and the hospital." Robert and Amara exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Robert spoke. "I'll do it, on one condition. Amara is there with me. Her story is as important as mine." Dr. Rivera nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I had a feeling you'd say that." "All right, I'll make the arrangements. The interview will take place tomorrow afternoon. Try to get some rest, both of you. Tomorrow will be intense." As Dr. Rivera left, Amara felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The events of the day had taken their toll, and the prospect of facing the media tomorrow loomed large in her mind. "You should go home, get some sleep," Robert said gently. "You've been here all day." Amara shook her head. "I'm not leaving you alone tonight, not with everything that's happening." Robert's eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you, Amara, for everything." As the night wore on, Amara dozed fitfully in the chair beside Robert's bed. Her dreams were a chaotic mix of flashing cameras, angry faces, and Robert's voice, sometimes strong, sometimes faltering. She awoke with a start as the first rays of dawn crept through the window. Robert was already awake, staring thoughtfully at the ceiling. "Good morning," Amara said, stretching the stiffness from her limbs. "How are you feeling?" Robert turned to her, his face a mask of determination. Nervous, scared, but ready. "Amara, before we do this interview, there's something I need to tell you." Amara leaned in, her heart "What is it, Robert?" He took a deep breath. "During my coma, I had experiences. I don't know if they were dreams or something else, but they changed me. I saw the world through other people's eyes. People I once hated. I felt their pain, their hopes, their humanity, and I realized how blind I'd been." Tears welled up in Robert's eyes as he continued. "But it was your voice, Amara, that guided me through it all. Your kindness, your stories, they were my lifeline. You showed me a path out of the darkness, and I'm determined to walk it, no matter how hard it gets." Amara felt her own eyes fill with tears. She reached out and took Robert's hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for telling me this, Robert. It means more than you know." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of preparation. Hospital staff bustled in and out, checking Robert's vitals, briefing them on interview protocols, and helping them prepare for the questions they might face. As the appointed hour approached, Amara helped Robert into a wheelchair. His strength was returning, but he was still weak from his long convalescence. Together, they made their way to a conference room that had been transformed into a makeshift studio. The chosen reporter, a respected journalist known for her fair and balanced reporting, was already there, going over her notes. Camera operators adjusted their equipment, while hospital PR staff hovered nervously in the background. As Amara and Robert took their places, the reality of what they were about to do hit home. They were about to bare their souls to the world, to invite millions of strangers into their deeply personal journey of transformation and healing. The reporter smiled warmly at them. "Amara Caldwell, Miss Johnson, thank you for agreeing to this interview. Are you ready to begin?" Robert looked at Amara, drawing strength from her presence. She nodded encouraging. "Yes," Robert said, his voice steady. "We're ready." The red light on the camera blinked on, and the reporter began. "Good afternoon. I'm here with Robert Caldwell, former leader of the white nationalist group, Pure America, and Amara Johnson, the nurse who cared for him during his 3-year coma. Amara Caldwell, let's start with you. Can you tell us about your awakening, both literal and figurative?" Robert took a deep breath, his hand finding Amara's out of frame. "When I woke up, I was a different man than the one who went into that coma. During those 3 years, I experienced a profound change. I saw the world through new eyes, felt the pain and joy of people I once considered enemies. And when I opened my eyes, the first person I saw was Amara. In that moment, I knew I could never go back to who I was before." The reporter nodded, turning to Amara. "Ms. Johnson, what was it like caring for someone you knew held such hateful beliefs? How did you find the strength to show compassion?" Amara straightened in her chair. "It wasn't easy. There were days when I struggled with anger, with the desire to walk away. But as a nurse, my duty is to care for all patients, regardless of who they are. And as I cared for Robert, I began to see beyond the label of white supremacist. I saw a human being, capable of change." As the interview progressed, Robert and Amara shared their story, the long nights of one-sided conversations, the gradual breaking down of barriers, and the moment of awakening that had changed everything. They spoke of the challenges they now faced, the threats and the skepticism, but also of their hope for the future. "I know many people won't believe I've changed," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "I understand their skepticism. I was a monster, spreading hate and fear. But I stand here today, asking for a chance to prove that change is possible. Not just for me, but for anyone who's been trapped in the darkness of hatred," Amara added. "This journey isn't just about Robert. It's about all of us, about our capacity for forgiveness, for growth, for seeing the humanity in those we once considered enemies. It won't be easy, but I believe it's a journey worth taking." As the interview drew to a close, the reporter asked one final question. "What would you say to those who are watching this, perhaps struggling with their own prejudices, or feeling hopeless about the state of race relations in our country?" Robert and Amara exchanged glances, a lifetime of understanding passing between them in that moment. It was Amara who answered. I would say, don't give up hope. Change is possible, even in the most unlikely places. It starts with seeing the humanity in each other, with small acts of kindness and understanding. Robert's journey is proof that even the deepest held beliefs can be transformed. But it takes courage, the courage to question our assumptions, to face our fears, and to open our hearts to those we once saw as other. As the red light on the camera blinked off, Robert and Amara sat in silence, the weight of what they had just done settling over them. They had laid bare their story, their hopes, and their fears to the world. Now, all they could do was wait and see how the world would respond. Outside the hospital, the crowds had grown. Supporters and protesters alike waited with bated breath for news of the... As word began to spread, reactions ranged from tears of hope to cries of disbelief. The story of Robert and Amara had touched a nerve, forcing people to confront their own beliefs about redemption, forgiveness, and the possibility of change. In living rooms across the country, families gathered around televisions, engaging in difficult conversations about race, prejudice, and the power of compassion. Social media exploded with hashtags and heated debates. The nation, it seemed, was at a tipping point, grappling with the implications of this unlikely story of transformation. As Robert and Amara made their way back to the hospital room, surrounded by a protective circle of security guards, they knew that their journey was far from over. The interview was just the beginning. The real work, the daily struggle to prove that change was possible, to build bridges across seemingly insurmountable divides, was only just beginning. But as they looked at each other, both saw a reflection of their own determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united by a shared belief in the power of compassion to transform even the darkest of hearts. As the days following the interview passed, Amara and Robert found themselves at the center of a national conversation. Their story had ignited a spark, challenging long-held beliefs about the possibility of personal transformation and the power of compassion to overcome hate. In Robert's hospital room, which had become a sort of sanctuary from the storm raging outside, Amara sat beside his bed, scrolling through her phone. The constant stream of notifications was overwhelming. Messages of support, criticism, and everything in between flooded her social media accounts. "Listen to this," Amara said, her voice a mix of awe and trepidation. "A group of former white supremacists has reached out. They want to talk to you, Robert. They say your story has given them hope that they too can change." Robert's eyes widened, a complex mix of emotions playing across his face. I never imagined. Do you think I should speak with them?" Before Amara could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Rivera entered, followed by a woman in a sharp business suit. "Amara, Robert," Dr. Rivera began, "I'd like you to meet Sarah Goldstein. She's a civil rights attorney who's offered to represent you both pro bono." Sarah stepped forward, her keen eyes taking in the scene before her. "Mr. Caldwell, Miss Johnson, it's an honor to meet you. I've been following your story closely, and I believe it has the potential to create real change. But it also comes with significant risks." Amara and Robert exchanged glances, the weight of Sarah's words settling over them. "What kind of risks are we talking about?" Amara asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. Sarah took a seat, her expression grave. "For starters, there are potential legal implications. Mr. Caldwell, your past actions and associations could lead to investigations or even charges. And Miss Johnson, your professional standing could be called into question by those who disagree with your choices." Robert's face paled, but he nodded resolutely. "I understand. I'm prepared to face the consequences of my past actions, but I want to use whatever platform I have now to make amends, to help others find their way out of hate." Sarah nodded, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "That's commendable, Mr. Caldwell, but we need to be strategic about how we proceed. Your story has the power to change hearts and minds, but it also has the potential to incite violence from those who see your transformation as a betrayal." As they discussed potential strategies and safeguards, Amara found her mind wandering to the broader implications of their situation. Their personal journey had become a lightning rod for a national debate on race, redemption, and the capacity for change. "What about the hospital?" Amara asked suddenly, turning to Dr. Rivera. "How is all of this affecting our work here?" Dr. Rivera sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's complicated. We've seen an uptick in donations from people inspired by your story, but we've also received threats. Some patients have requested transfers, not wanting to be in the same facility as a former white supremacist." The word "former" hung in the air, a reminder of the skepticism they still faced. "I want to do more," Robert said, his voice growing stronger, "not just interviews or statements. I want to actively work towards dismantling the ideologies I once promoted. Is there a way we can do that safely?" Sarah leaned forward, her eyes alight with possibility. "Actually, there might be. I have connections with several anti-hate organizations. They've been looking for someone with insider knowledge to help develop more effective outreach programs. Your perspective could be invaluable." As they continued to discuss possibilities, Amara felt a mix of hope and trepidation. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but it also held the promise of real, meaningful change. Suddenly, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Raised voices and the sound of hurried footsteps grew louder. Dr. Rivera moved to the door, peering out cautiously. "It's okay," he said, relief evident in his voice. "It's Stephanie. She's trying to get past security." Moments later, Stephanie burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "Amara, Robert, you need to see this." She held up her tablet, playing a video that had clearly gone viral. On the screen, a young man with tattoos peeking out from under his collar spoke directly to the camera. "I've been a member of Pure America for 5 years," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "But after seeing Robert Caldwell's interview, I can't do it anymore. If he can change, maybe I can too. I'm done with hate. I want out." The room fell silent as the video ended. Amara felt tears pricking at her eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that their story was already having a tangible impact. Robert reached for her hand, his own eyes glistening. "We did that, Amara. We gave him hope." Sarah cleared her throat, bringing their attention back to the matter at hand. "This is exactly the kind of impact we can amplify, but we need to move carefully. Each person who speaks out like this is also putting themselves at risk." As they delved into discussions of outreach programs, support networks, and safety protocols, Amara felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their journey, which had begun in the quiet of a hospital room, was now rippling out into the world, touching lives they had never imagined reaching. Hours passed, filled with intense planning and debate. As evening fell, Dr. Rivera insisted that Robert get some rest. The others filed out, leaving Amara alone with Robert once more. "It's overwhelming, isn't it?" Robert said softly, fatigue evident in his voice. All of this from a simple act of kindness. Amara sat on the edge of his bed, her hand still in his. Simple, maybe, but not easy. "Every day, I had to choose compassion over anger, hope over despair. And you, Robert, you had to face the darkest parts of yourself and choose to change. There's nothing simple about that." Robert's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "I couldn't have done it without you, Amara. You were my lifeline, my guide back to humanity." As they sat in comfortable silence, both lost in thought about the journey ahead, a soft knock at the door interrupted. A young nurse, barely out of school by the looks of her, peeked in hesitantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to thank you both. My brother, he's been involved with some bad people, spouting hateful things. But after seeing your interview, he called me. We talked for the first time in years. He's asking for help to get out." Tears streamed down the young nurse's face as she spoke. Amara stood, moving to embrace her colleague. Robert watched, his own eyes brimming with emotion. As the nurse left, Amara turned back to Robert. "This is bigger than us now, isn't it?" Robert nodded solemnly. "It is, and that's terrifying, but it's also beautiful. We have a chance to heal wounds that run so deep, Amara. A chance to show that love really can conquer hate." As night fell over the hospital, Amara and Robert found themselves at a crossroads. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential dangers and challenges. But it also held the promise of profound change, not just for them, but for countless others trapped in cycles of hate and fear. Outside, the world continued to buzz with debate and discussion sparked by their story. But in the quiet of the hospital room, Amara and Robert found a moment of peace. They had started this journey as nurse and patient, divided by a chasm of hatred and prejudice. Now, they faced the future as partners, united in their commitment to spread a message of hope and transformation. As Amara prepared to leave for the night, Robert caught her hand one last time. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we face it together." Amara squeezed his hand, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Together," she agreed. As she walked out into the cool night air, Amara felt a sense of purpose, unlike anything she had experienced before. Their story was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. And with each step forward, they had the potential to change not just their own lives, but the very fabric of society itself. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenge. But as Amara looked up at the stars twinkling in the night sky, she felt a surge of hope. Change was possible, redemption was real, and love in all its forms had the power to light even the darkest of paths. As weeks passed, Robert's physical recovery progressed steadily, mirroring the profound inner transformation he had undergone. The hospital room that had been his world for so long was now a hub of activity, filled with visitors, counselors, and civil rights activists eager to be part of this unexpected journey of redemption. One crisp autumn morning, Amara arrived for her shift to find Robert sitting up in bed, a look of determination on his face. "I think it's time," he said as soon as she entered the room. Amara paused, sensing the weight of his words. "Time for what, Robert?" "To leave the hospital," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with anxiety. "To face the world outside these walls. I can't hide in here forever, Amara. If I'm going to make a real difference, I need to be out there." Amara felt a mixture of pride and apprehension wash over. She had known this day would come, but the reality of it still took her breath away. "Are you sure you're ready?" she asked, moving to check his vitals out of habit. "Physically and emotionally?" Robert nodded, reaching for her hand. "As ready as I'll ever be. But I can't do it alone, Amara. I need you with me." The implications of his request hung in the air between them. Amara knew that stepping out with Robert would mean fully committing herself to this cause, potentially risking her career and her safety. Before she could respond, Dr. Rivera entered the room, followed by Sarah Goldstein, their attorney. The serious expressions on their faces indicated that they too sensed the gravity of the moment. "Robert, Amara, Dr. Rivera began. We've just received word that the hospital board has approved Robert's discharge, but there are complications." Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm but urgent. "We've been monitoring the situation outside the hospital. The media frenzy has died down somewhat, but there are still groups camped out, waiting. Some are supporters, but others, well, let's just say not everyone believes in Robert's transformation." Amara felt a chill run down her spine. The safe bubble of the hospital had allowed them to focus on Robert's recovery and their shared mission. Now, the reality of the world they were about to step into came crashing down. "What are our options?" Robert asked, his grip on Amara's hand tightening slightly. Sarah laid out a plan, detailing safe houses, security measures, and a carefully orchestrated media strategy. As she spoke, Amara found her mind wandering, imagining the challenges that lay ahead. How would her family react to her new role in Robert's life? Would her colleagues at the hospital understand her choice to continue this journey beyond her professional duties? "Amara?" Robert's voice brought her back to the present. "What do you think? I know I'm asking a lot, but..." She looked into his eyes, seeing the mixture of hope and fear that she felt mirrored in her own heart. In that moment, she knew her decision was already made. "I'm with you, Robert," she said firmly. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Amara took a leave of absence from the hospital, a decision that was met with mixed reactions from her colleagues. Stephanie hugged her tightly, whispering words of support, while others kept their distance, their disapproval evident in sidelong glances and hushed conversations. On the day of Robert's discharge, the hospital was in lockdown. Security teams coordinated with local police to ensure a safe exit. As Amara helped Robert into a wheelchair, a hospital policy he grudgingly accepted, she felt the weight of their decision settling on her shoulders. "Ready?" she asked, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Robert reached up, placing his hand over hers. "As long as you're with me." They made their way through the hospital corridors, flanked by security guards. The usual bustle of hospital life had been replaced by an eerie quiet, broken only by the soft squeak of the wheelchair's wheels. As they approached the main entrance, the muffled sound of the crowd outside grew louder. Amara's heart raced, her palms growing sweaty. This was it, the moment they stepped out of the safety of the hospital and into the uncertain world beyond. The doors slid open, and they were immediately engulfed in a cacophony of shouting, camera flashes, and jostling bodies. Amara blinked against the bright autumn sunlight, momentarily disoriented. Robert. How do you respond to those who say your change is just an act? Amara, are you afraid for your safety? Mr. Caldwell, do you have a message for your former associates? The questions came rapid fire, a dizzying assault on the senses. Amara felt Robert tense in the wheelchair, his hand seeking hers. She squeezed it reassuringly, drawing strength from their connection. As they made their way through the crowd towards a waiting car, Amara caught glimpses of the diverse gathering. There were supporters holding signs of encouragement, skeptics with challenging messages, and a small but vocal group of Robert's former associates, their faces contorted with anger and betrayal. Suddenly, a scuffle broke out near the front of the crowd. A man with a shaved head and tattoos pushed forward, his face red with rage. "Traitor!" he screamed, lunging towards Robert. "You betrayed everything we stood for." Security moved quickly, intercepting the man before he could reach them, but his words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the opposition they faced. As they finally reached the car, Amara helped Robert inside before sliding in next to him. The door slammed shut, muffling the chaos outside. In the sudden quiet, Amara became aware of her rapid breathing and pounding heart. "Are you okay?" she asked Robert, studying his face for signs of distress. He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the scene outside the tinted windows. "I knew it would be hard, but..." Seeing the hatred in their eyes, Amara, knowing that was me not so long ago. "It's overwhelming." Amara took his hand, her voice soft but firm. "That's not you anymore, Robert. The fact that it affects you this way, that you can recognize the pain and anger, that's proof of how far you've come." As the car pulled away from the hospital, weaving through the crowd and onto the open road, Amara felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. They were leaving behind the safety of the hospital, venturing into a world that was not yet ready to fully accept Robert's transformation. Their destination was a safe house on the outskirts of town, a place where Robert could continue his recovery and they could plan their next steps. As the city gave way to suburbia and then to more rural landscapes, Amara found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. She thought of the countless nights spent by Robert's bedside, of the moment he first opened his eyes, of the challenges they had already faced and overcome. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of their shared story, a story that was now expanding to touch lives far beyond their own. "Thinking?" Robert asked, noticing her pensive expression. Amara turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'm thinking about how far we've come and how far we still have to go. I'm thinking about all the lives we might be able to change, all the bridges we might be able to build." Robert nodded, his eyes shining with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "I'm scared, Amara, scared of failing, of not living up to the faith you've put in me. What if I can't do enough to make up for my past?" Amara squeezed his hand, her voice filled with conviction. "Robert, the very fact that you're asking that question shows how much you've already changed. We're not aiming for perfection here. We're aiming for progress, for growth, for showing the world that change is possible." As they continued their journey, the car radio hummed softly in the background, A news bulletin caught their attention. In a surprising turn of events, several members of the white nationalist group Pure America have come forward, inspired by the story of Robert Caldwell. They are renouncing their racist beliefs and seeking help to leave the organization. This development has sent shockwaves through extremist communities nationwide. Amara and Robert exchanged glances, the weight of their influence settling upon them. Their personal journey had sparked a movement, offering hope to those trapped in cycles of hate and fear. As the safe house came into view, a modest cabin nestled among towering pine trees, Amara felt a sense of possibility wash over her. This was not an ending, but a beginning. From this quiet retreat, they would launch their mission to spread understanding, to challenge deeply held beliefs, and to offer a path to redemption for those who sought it. The car came to a stop, and for a moment, neither of them moved. They sat in silence, hands clasped, each lost in thought about the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. "Whatever happens, Amara, I want you to know, you didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to live it differently, to be better. I'll spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of the chance you've given me." Amara felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion in Robert's words. "We're in this together, Rob, every step of the way." As they stepped out of the car and into the crisp autumn air, Amara felt a sense of purpose unlike anything she had experienced before. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and potential dangers, but it was also filled with hope. Hope for healing, for understanding, and for the power of compassion to transform even the most hardened hearts. Together, they walked towards the cabin, ready to begin the next chapter of their extraordinary journey. The world was watching, waiting to see if love truly could conquer hate, if redemption was possible, even for those who had once embraced the darkest ideologies. And Amara and Robert were determined to show them that it was. As Amara and Robert settled into the safe house, the reality of their new life began to take shape. The cabin, though modest, offered a peaceful retreat from the chaos they had left behind. Surrounded by towering pines and the gentle sounds of nature, it felt like a world away from the media frenzy and potential threats that lurked beyond. Their first evening was spent in quiet conversation, planning their next moves and processing the whirlwind of events that had led them to this point. As night fell, Amara found herself on the small porch, wrapped in a blanket and staring up at the star-filled sky. Robert joined her, his movements still slow and deliberate as he continued to regain his strength. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked softly, settling into the chair beside her. Amara sighed, her breath visible in the cool night air. "I'm thinking about home," she admitted. "About my family, my colleagues at the hospital. I haven't had a chance to really explain to them why I'm doing this. I'm worried about what they must be thinking." Robert nodded, understanding etched on his face. "I'm sorry, Amara. I never meant to pull you away from your life." She turned to him, her eyes fierce with determination. "Don't apologize, Robert. This was my choice. I believe in what we're doing. It's just complicated." As if on cue, Amara's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Her heart leapt when she saw the caller ID, her mother. With a deep breath, she answered. "Mom? Amara Johnson, what in the world do you think you're doing?" Her mother's voice was a mixture of concern and exasperation. "I turn on the TV and see you with that man. Leaving the hospital like you're some kind of... Mom, please," Amara interrupted, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I know this is hard to understand, but I need you to listen." Over the next hour, Amara explained everything. The long nights by Robert's bedside, the gradual changes she had witnessed, and the profound transformation that had taken place. She spoke of her belief in redemption and the power of compassion to change hearts and minds. As she talked, Robert sat silently beside her, offering silent support. He could hear the muffled sounds of Amara's mother's responses, ranging from skepticism to grudging understanding. Finally, Amara's voice softened. "Mom, I know you're worried, but I need you to trust me. This is important work. Maybe the most important thing I'll ever do." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When her mother spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I raise you to stand up for what you believe in, baby girl. I may not understand all of this, but I'm proud of you. Just promise me you'll be careful." As Amara ended the call, tears streaming down her face, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She turned to Robert, who was watching her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Your mother sounds like an incredible woman," he said softly. Amara nodded, wiping her eyes. "She is, and she made me realize something, Robert. If we're going to do this, if we're really going to try to change hearts and minds, we need to start with our own families, our own communities." Robert's eyes widened as he grasped the implications of her words. "You mean, yes," Amara said, her voice growing stronger. "It's time for you to face your past, Robert, to confront the people you left behind, the ideology you once embraced. Are you ready for that?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with potential consequences. Robert's face was a canvas of emotions: fear, determination, and a flicker of hope. "I don't know if I'll ever be truly ready," he admitted, "but I know it's necessary. Where do we start?" The next few days were a flurry of activity. Working closely with Sarah Goldstein and a team of experts in de-radicalization, Amara and Robert began to craft a strategy. They would start small, reaching out to individuals who had shown signs of wavering in their extremist beliefs. Their first major test came in the form of a video call with Jake, Robert's former second-in-command in Pure America, the man who had burst into the hospital room, spewing hate and disbelief at Robert's transformation. As they prepared for the call, Amara could feel the tension radiating from Robert. She placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "Remember," she said softly, "you're not alone in this. I'm right here with you." Robert nodded, taking a deep breath as the call connected. Jake's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why did you want to talk to me, traitor?" Jake spat, his words dripping with venom. Robert flinched but held his ground. "Because I care about you, Jake. Because I remember what it was like to be consumed by hate. I want to show you there's another way." What followed was an intense, often heated conversation. Jake hurled accusations and insults, his face growing redder with each passing minute. But Robert remained calm, answering each charge with honesty and vulnerability. "I was wrong, Jake," Robert said, his voice steady. "All those years, all those things we believed, they were based on fear and ignorance. I've seen another way, a better way, and I want that for you too." As the conversation progressed, Amara watched in awe as Robert's words began to penetrate Jake's armor of anger. There were moments when Jake's facade cracked, revealing glimpses of the scared, lonely man beneath the hateful exterior. By the end of the call, Jake was no longer shouting. He sat in silence, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Rob," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's falling apart." "I know," Robert replied gently. "But that's where healing begins, Jake. When we let go of the lies we've been telling ourselves, we make room for the truth." As the call ended, Robert slumped in his chair, emotionally exhausted. Amara moved to his side, wrapping him in a tight embrace. "You did it," she whispered. "You reached him." Robert shook his head, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "It's just the beginning. There's so much more work to do." Over the next few weeks, similar scenes played out. Robert, with Amara by his side, reached out to former associates, family members he had alienated, and even victims of his past actions. Each conversation was difficult, often painful, but with each one, they saw small seeds of change being planted. Their work didn't go unnoticed. Media requests poured in, eager to follow up on the story that had captivated the nation. Amara and Robert were selective, agreeing only to interviews that allowed them to share their message of transformation and hope. One crisp morning, as they prepared for a particularly important interview with a national news program, Amara found Robert standing by the window, lost in thought. "What's on your mind?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. Robert turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and determination. "I was just thinking about how far we've come and how far we still have to go." "Amara, do you think we're making a difference? Really making a difference?" Amara reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I know we are, Robert. Every person we reach, every mind we open. It's like dropping a pebble in a pond. The ripples spread farther than we can see. As they stood there, hand in hand, Amara reflected on their journey. From the sterile confines of a hospital room to this cabin in the woods, they had embarked on a mission that was changing lives, including their own. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges and potential setbacks. But as Amara looked at Robert, seeing the man he had become and the passion that now drove him, she felt a surge of hope. Their story was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. With each conversation, each interview, each small victory, they were writing a new chapter, not just in their own lives, but in the broader narrative of human understanding and redemption. As they prepared to face the cameras once again, to share their message with the world, Amara and Robert exchanged a look of quiet determination. They were no longer just a former white supremacist and a nurse who cared for him. They had become partners in a mission greater than themselves, ambassadors of hope in a world desperately in need of healing. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in their belief that love could indeed conquer hate, that redemption was possible, and that even the deepest divides could be bridged by compassion and understanding. The interview awaited, and with it, another opportunity to spread their message of transformation and hope. Amara and Robert stepped out of the cabin, ready to face the world and continue their extraordinary journey. As autumn gave way to winter, Amara and Robert's work continued to gain momentum. Their story had sparked a national conversation about redemption, forgiveness, and the possibility of profound personal change. But with increased visibility came new challenges and unexpected consequences. One frosty morning, as they prepared for a speaking engagement at a nearby university, Sarah Goldstein arrived at the cabin, her face etched with concern. "We have a situation," she said, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. "The FBI wants to talk to Robert." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Robert's face paled, but he nodded slowly. "I knew this day might come. What do they want to know?" Sarah spread out a series of documents on the table. "They're interested in your knowledge of Pure America's activities, particularly any illegal operations. But there's more. Some former members are coming forward, inspired by your transformation. They're offering information in exchange for leniency." Amara felt a knot form in her stomach. She had known that Robert's past would eventually catch up with them, but the reality of it was still jarring. "What are our options?" she asked, her hand finding Robert's under the table. Sarah outlined a plan, emphasizing the importance of full cooperation with the authorities. "This could actually be an opportunity," she explained. "If we handle it right, Robert's willingness to assist in dismantling these networks could further validate his change of heart." As they discussed strategy, Amara couldn't help but notice the toll this was taking on Robert. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes shadowed with the weight of his past actions. "Robert," she said softly, once Sarah had left to make arrangements, "are you okay?" He looked up at her, his expression a mixture of resignation and determination. "I have to do this, Amara. It's part of making amends. But I'm scared. What if they decide I need to pay for my past crimes? What if this ends with me in prison?" Amara felt her heart clench at the vulnerability in his voice. She took his hands in hers, her gaze steady and reassuring. "Whatever happens, we face it together. Remember why we're doing this. Every bit of information you provide could help prevent others from going down the path you once walked." Robert nodded, drawing strength from her words. "You're right. It's time to face the music. No more running from my past." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Robert spent long hours in interviews with FBI agents, recounting his involvement with Pure America and providing crucial information about the group's structure and operations. Amara stood by his side throughout, offering support and occasionally providing her own insights into Robert's transformation. As news of Robert's cooperation spread, it sparked a chain reaction within the white nationalist community. More members began to come forward, some seeking redemption, others hoping to cut deals before the net closed around them. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun set over the snow-covered landscape, Robert turned to Amara with a look of wonder on his face. "Do you realize what's happening?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're witnessing the beginning of the end of pure America. And it all started with a simple act of kindness from you." Amara shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "It started with your choice, Robert. Your choice to listen, to change, to be better. I just provided the opportunity." As they sat in comfortable silence, reflecting on the magnitude of what was unfolding, Amara's phone buzzed with a news alert. She read it aloud, her voice shaking slightly. "Breaking news. In a shocking turn of events, Pure America, one of the country's largest white nationalist organizations, appears to be collapsing from within. Multiple high-ranking members have come forward to authorities, citing the transformation of former leader Robert Caldwell as their inspiration." Robert's eyes filled with tears as the implications sank in. "I never imagined. I hope we could make a difference. But this..." Amara squeezed his hand, her own eyes glistening. "This is just the beginning, Robert. Think of all the lives that will be changed. All the young people who won't be drawn into hate because of what's happening." As they basked in the momentous news, a new challenge emerged on the horizon. The university where they were scheduled to speak had become a hotbed of controversy. Student groups were divided, with some protesting Robert's presence on campus, while others rallied in support of his message of transformation. The morning of the event, Amara and Robert arrived at the campus to find a sea of protesters. Signs bobbed above the crowd, some welcoming them with messages of hope and forgiveness, others condemning Robert's presence with harsh words and accusations. As they made their way through the throng, protected by a phalanx of security guards, Amara felt Robert tense beside her. She glanced at him, seeing the conflict in his eyes as he faced the very real consequences of his past actions. "Remember why we're here," she whispered, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "Every person who hears our story is a potential agent of change." Robert nodded, squaring his shoulders as they entered the auditorium. The room was packed, the air electric with anticipation and tension. As they took the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. Robert stepped up to the microphone, his hand shaking slightly. He looked out over the sea of faces, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "I stand before you today not as a reformed white supremacist, not as a man seeking absolution, but as a human being who has been given a second chance at life, a chance to right the wrongs of my past, to spread a message of hope and transformation." As Robert shared his story, his voice growing stronger with each word, Amara watched the audience. She saw skepticism give way to curiosity, anger softening into contemplation. When Robert spoke of the moment he woke from his coma, of the kindness shown to him by Amara, she saw tears in the eyes of many listeners. When it was Amara's turn to speak, she stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. "I'm often asked why I chose to help Robert, to believe in his capacity for change. The truth is, it wasn't a single choice. It was a series of choices made every day to see the humanity in someone society had written off as irredeemable." As they opened the floor for questions, the real impact of their work became clear. Students and faculty alike stood to share their own stories of struggle with prejudice, of family members lost to extremist ideologies, of their own journeys towards understanding and acceptance. One young man's question particularly stood out. He stood, his voice shaking with emotion. I've been involved with a white nationalist group on campus. But listening to you both, I want out. I want to change. How do I even begin?" The auditorium fell silent, all eyes on Robert and Amara. Robert stepped forward, his eyes locked with the young man's. "It begins with this moment," he said softly, "with the courage to question what you've been taught, to open your heart to new perspectives. It's not an easy journey, but I promise you, it's worth it." As the event concluded, Amara and Robert found themselves surrounded by students and faculty, all eager to continue the conversation, to share their own experiences, to ask for guidance. What had begun as a controversial speaking engagement had transformed into a powerful moment of community and healing. Later that night, as they drove back to the cabin, Amara and Robert sat in contemplative silence, processing the events of the day. "Do you think we made a difference?" Robert asked, his voice tinged with hope and uncertainty. Amara smiled, reaching over to take his hand. I know we did. Every person in that room left with something to think about, with a new perspective to consider. That's how change happens, Robert. One heart, one mind at a time. As they pulled up to the cabin, Amara's phone buzzed with a message. It was from a young man who had asked about leaving his white nationalist group. He had attached a photo of a torn-up membership card with a simple message, "First step taken. Thank you." Amara showed the message to Robert, watching as his eyes filled with tears of joy and relief. In that moment, they both knew that their work, challenging as it was making a real, tangible difference in the world. As they stepped out into the crisp night air, stars twinkling overhead, Amara and Robert felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their journey was far from over, but with each day, each conversation, each small victory, they were moving closer to their goal of a world where understanding triumphed over hate, where redemption was possible for those brave enough to seek it. Hand in hand, they walked towards the cabin, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, secure in the knowledge that their message of hope and transformation was taking root, growing stronger with each passing day. As winter melted into spring, Amara and Robert found themselves at a crossroads. Their work had gained national attention, inspiring countless individuals to confront their own biases and seek paths to redemption. But with their increased visibility came new challenges and opportunities that would test the strength of their partnership and the depth of their commitment to change. One sunny morning, as they sat on the porch of their cabin, sipping coffee and discussing their upcoming schedule, Sarah Goldstein arrived with news that would alter the course of their journey. I've received an interesting proposal, Sarah began, her eyes alight with excitement. A major publishing house wants you both to write a book about your experiences. They believe your story could reach an even wider audience, potentially changing millions of lives. Amara and Robert exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and trepidation passing between them. The prospect of sharing their story on such a grand scale was both thrilling and daunting. There's more, Sarah continued. They're also interested in developing a documentary series that would follow your ongoing work, showcasing real-time transformations and the impact of your message. The possibilities swirled in Amara's mind. A book, a documentary series. These were platforms that could amplify their message beyond anything they had imagined. But with greater exposure came greater risks. What do you think, Robert? Amara asked, noting the conflicted expression on his face. Robert took a deep breath, his brow furrowed in thought. It's an incredible opportunity, he said slowly, but I'm worried about the impact on the people we're trying to help. Some of them are just starting their journeys away from extremism. Putting them in the spotlight could be detrimental. Amara nodded, understanding his concerns. You're right. We need to find a way to protect their privacy while still sharing the power of these transformations. Over the next few weeks, they worked closely with Sarah and the publishing team to develop a plan that would balance the need for compelling storytelling with the ethical considerations of their work. They decided to use pseudonyms for those still in the early stages of their transformation and to focus on the broader themes of redemption and change rather than sensationalizing individual stories. As they delved into the writing process, Amara and Robert found themselves revisiting the early days of their journey, reliving those moments. The tension, the fear, the gradual building of trust brought a new depth to their understanding of each other and the work they were doing. One evening, as they sat surrounded by notes and drafts, Robert looked up at Amara, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and awe. I never properly thanked you, he said softly. Amara tilted her head, puzzled. For what? For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For seeing the possibility of change when everyone else had given up. Robert's voice cracked with emotion. You didn't just save my life, Amara. You gave me a reason to live it differently. Amara felt tears welling up in her eyes. She reached across the table, taking Robert's hand in hers. You did the hard work, Robert. You made the choice to change, to face your past, to become a force for good in the world. I'm just grateful I got to be part of that journey. As spring bloomed into summer, their book neared completion. The documentary crew arrived, setting up equipment and beginning to capture the day-to-day reality of their work. Amara and Robert found themselves juggling writing sessions, speaking engagements, and intensely personal counseling sessions with individuals seeking to leave extremist groups. The strain began to show. Late one night, after a particularly challenging day of filming, Amara found Robert sitting alone on the porch, his head in his hands. "Robert?" she said softly, settling into the chair beside him. "What's wrong?" He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "I'm scared, Amara. Scared that we're moving too fast, that we're losing sight of what's really important in all this media attention." Amara felt a flicker of fear in her own heart. She had been so caught up in the whirlwind of their expanding platform that she hadn't fully considered the toll it was taking on Robert and on herself. "Maybe we need to take a step back," she suggested, her voice gentle. "Remember why we started this journey in the first place?" Robert nodded, a look of relief washing over his face. "I'd like that. Maybe we could visit some of the people we've helped, see how they're doing, remind ourselves of the real impact we're having." The idea took root, growing into a plan. They decided to take a break from the book and documentary projects, embarking on a cross-country journey to reconnect with individuals whose lives had been touched by their work. Their first stop was a small town in the Midwest, where they met with Jake, Robert's former second-in-command, who had been one of the first to follow in his footsteps of transformation. As they sat in Jake's modest living room, surrounded by photos of his young family, the true impact of their work became clear. "I never thought I could have this," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion as he cradled his infant daughter. "A life filled with love instead of hate. You showed me it was possible, Rob. You and Amara." Similar scenes played out across the country. They met with former extremists who had become advocates for tolerance, with families reunited after years of estrangement, with communities healing old wounds through dialogue and understanding. As they traveled, Amara and Robert found their own bond deepening. The shared experiences, the long conversations on the road, the quiet moments of reflection, all served to strengthen their partnership and renew their commitment to the work. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset over the Grand Canyon, Robert turned to Amara, his face serious. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the future, about where we go from here." Amara felt her heart skip a beat, unsure of where this conversation was heading. "What do you mean?" Robert took a deep breath. "This work we're doing, it's bigger than just you and me now. I think we need to create something more permanent. An organization dedicated to helping people leave extremist groups, to promoting understanding and reconciliation." Amara's mind raced with the possibilities. "A foundation?" she asked, excitement building in her voice. Robert nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Exactly. Something that can continue this work long after we're gone. Something that can provide resources, support, a network for people seeking to change their lives." As they discussed the idea, fleshing out details and imagining the potential impact, Amara felt a renewed sense of purpose washing over her. This was the next step in their journey, not just telling their story, but creating a lasting legacy of transformation and hope. Returning from their journey, they threw themselves into the work of establishing the foundation. The book and documentary projects, when they resumed, took on a new depth, informed by the stories they had gathered and the renewed clarity of their mission. On the day of the book launch, Amara and Robert stood backstage at a large auditorium, preparing to address a packed house. The air was electric with anticipation, the room filled with supporters, skeptics, and media from around the world. "Are you ready for this?" Amara asked, squeezing Robert's hand. He looked at her, his eyes shining with a mixture of nervousness and determination. "As long as you're by my side, I'm ready for anything." As they stepped onto the stage, greeted by a wave of applause, Amara felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Their journey, which had begun in the quiet of a hospital room, had blossomed into a movement that was changing lives and challenging deeply held beliefs across the nation. Robert began to speak, his voice strong and clear. "We stand before you today not as experts, not as saviors, but as two people who have witnessed the transformative power of compassion. understanding, and forgiveness. As Amara listened to Robert's words, she reflected on the extraordinary path that had led them to this moment. From nurse and patient, to unlikely allies, to partners in a mission greater than themselves, their story was a testament to the possibility of change, the power of second chances, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But as Amara looked out over the sea of faces, seeing hope reflected back at her, she knew that they were on the right path. Together, they would continue to spread their message of transformation and redemption, one heart and mind at a time, building a future where understanding triumphed over hate, and where every person had the chance to rewrite their own story. As Robert concluded his speech, Amara stepped forward to join him. Hand in hand, they faced the audience, ready to answer questions, to share their experiences, and to continue the work of building bridges across the deepest of divides. Their journey was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But with each step forward, they were creating a legacy of hope, proving that even in the darkest of times, love could indeed conquer hate. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to support us by leaving a like and subscribing to our Slices of Life channel. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which city are you talking about? It's very rewarding for us to provide our followers with an enjoyable moment. We appreciate the unconditional support you show us in every story. Blessings!